What is this hardware? It's nothing but the physical component of computer system. Hardwares are nothing but the device and they are physically present to feed the data what I required here. I required input device. All these operations are carried out by the arithmetic and logic unit. Hello to all, a warm welcome to my new session on Fundamentals of Computers. I'm Revati from the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. So dear student, before going to start my today's session, let me to recall the topics which I have covered in my last session. In my last session, I have started with definition about computer. Then I have covered characteristics of computers. Along with that, I have discussed data and information. Along with that, I have discussed hardware and software. Anyway, dear student, these are the important topic from the examination point of view. You can able to expect 1 mark, 5 mark or 10 mark questions. Now, in my today's session, at the beginning, I'm going to deal with difference between software and hardware. Along with that, I'm going to deal with functional components of computer. So these are the two topics I'm going to deal in my today's session. Now, at the beginning, I'm going to have difference between hardware and software. So dear student, when I say it is hardware and software, what are the things you can able to understand? That is, software means what? It's nothing but the set of instruction and we cannot able to touch and we cannot able to feel. But what about hardware? It's a component of computer system and we can able to touch as well as we can able to feel. So this is all about hardware as well as software. Now let's see some of the difference between hardware and software. So at the beginning, I'm going to have hardware. So what is this hardware? It's nothing but the physical component of computer system. But whereas software, it is nothing but a set of instruction or group of instruction together called software. But if I consider hardware, I can able to touch, I can able to feel as well as I can able to see. But what about software? As I know that it's nothing but the set of instructions, so I cannot able to feel it and I cannot able to touch it. But if I consider hardware constructed using physical materials as well as components. If I consider hardware, all the hardwares are made up of using physical materials as well as components. And if I consider software, here softwares are developed by the programmer. So it is developed by the programmer by using any programming language. But if I consider hardware, it's manufactured. So it is manufactured by using physical materials as well as components. And if I consider hardware, hardwares are not affected by the virus. If I consider software, most of the softwares are frequently affected by the virus as well as worms. Now, if I consider hardware, so here hardwares are nothing but the device and they are physically present and I cannot able to make a copy of that. But if I consider software, user can able to make a copy of the software. Now, if I consider hardware, example for hardwares are nothing but monitor, all the monitors, as well as keyboards, mouse, RAM, etc. And if I consider software, and some of the example for software, I can able to consider all the operating systems like Windows, in that Windows 7, Windows XP, etc., Linux, Unix, etc. Along with that, I can able to consider all the application softwares like Nudi, Baraha, Tally, or Microsoft Office. These are the example for software. So, dear student, from the examination point of view, this is also very, very important topic. Now, moving further, I'm going to have the functional component of a computer. Now, dear student, we know that what is computer. So, what is computer? It is an automatic calculation device, or it's an electronic device responsible for store, recall, and process the data. Now, what are the functions of computer? That is nothing but accept the data. So, after accepting data, what is the next job of the computer? That is nothing but store the data. After storing, what is the next job of computer? Is to execute the data. After executing, what is the next job of the computer here? That is display the data, at the same time store the data for future reference. So these are the functions of computer system, and to perform all these functions, computer must have functional components. And what are the functional components? The computer must have here input unit, processing unit, output unit. Along with that, computer must have memory unit. So here all the units are divided based on the functionality of computer. So all these units are categorized based on the functionalities of computer. Anyway, dear student, let's see the block diagram of computer. So this is the block diagram of a computer. Now, as I discussed, computer includes 4 units. That is, computers are made up of 4 units. That is nothing but input unit. And I'm going to have storage unit. That is nothing but memory unit. Along with that, I'm going to have CPU, and I'm going to have output unit. Now, how the computer is going to accept the input? Dear student, if I consider computer system, computers are able to accept the input from the user through the keyboard. Now, whatever the input, that is maybe in the form of text, numbers, audios, videos, all those things are given to the computer system. And how all the things are given? That is in the form of input. And to provide input, I must require input unit. And the example for input unit is nothing but keyboard. So it is keyboard. This is the example for input device. Now, whatever the input I'm going to enter or feed into the computer system, that must be stored in the memory. So before going to execute any data, the data must be stored in the memory. And when I talk about memory, there are two types of memory, primary memory as well as secondary memory. And I'm going to have CPU. So dear student, CPU includes all the storage, along with that control unit as well as arithmetic logical unit, that is nothing but ALU. And the heart of the computer system here, it is CPU. So anyway, dear student, all the functional components of computer systems are explained in detail in my today's session itself. But at present, you just remember this diagram along with the parts of the computer system. Now, I'm going to have output unit. So what is the job of the output unit? Is to display the output to the user. And how the outputs are displayed? Through the monitor or by using printer. So what is printer here? That is nothing but hard copy. That means outputs are displayed or given to the customer or user in the form of printout. So the output unit here is printer as well as monitor. Now, dear student, please remember here, input device are responsible for accessing data, and whatever the data is read, that is stored in the memory, and at the same time it is given to the CPU for further processing. And after processing, the data are stored once again in the memory, and if the data are required by the CPU once again, then it's going to fetch the data from the memory. So before going to execute any data, the data must be fetched from the memory, that is secondary memory to main memory, and all those things are carried out by the CPU, and the output is given to the user. So that is the reason the outputs are given to the user in the form of soft copy output or hard copy output. So what is soft copy output here? That is nothing but the monitor. And what about hard copy output? That is nothing but the printer. Now let me to discuss all the components in detail. So at the beginning, I'm going to have input device. So suppose if I want to work done by the computer system, then I want to feed the data. To feed the data, what I required here? I required input device. So an input device is any hardware component. So I can able to consider any hardware component that is nothing but the input device, and that allows the user to enter or feed the data and instruction to a computer system. And the most commonly and widely used input devices are keyboard, mouse as well as scanner. Now, the next component here is central processing unit. So, what is the job of the central processing unit? Is to process the data. So, what is this processing? Processing is nothing but an execution of program or data, and it is called CPU. That is nothing but central processing unit, and it is also known as heart of the computer system, and all the operations are carried by the CPU. So a CPU is the part of computer system that carries out the instruction of a computer. So whatever the instruction I'm going to provide to the computer system, that is carried out by the central processing unit, and it is the unit that reads. So it is a unit that is capable to read as well as execute the program as well as instruction. Hence, it's also known as brain of the computer system. So here CPU is responsible for reading the data as well as executing the data. For that reason, it is known as brain of the computer system, and the CPU includes three more units, that is memory unit, arithmetic unit, and logic unit and control unit. So these are the three parts or sections of central processing unit. So what is the job of the CPU? Is to carry the instruction. So the main job of the CPU is to carry the instruction of a computer system, and it's also responsible for reading the instruction as well as executing the program. Now I'm going to have control unit. So as the name itself indicates that all the controlling activity, coordination activities are done by the control unit, and it is responsible for controlling the flow of data as well as it is responsible for direct the transfer of program as well as instruction and data between various units. So here control unit is to responsible for coordinating all the activities of computer system in the various units. So control unit is nothing but the CU, and it's responsible for control as well as direct the transfer of program, instruction and data between various units, and the main activity is to maintain order and direct the operation. So along with the controlling as well as directing, it's also responsible for maintaining the order of the execution. So maintaining the order of the execution means what? Execute first program, after the completion of first program, execute the next program. So here CU is responsible for maintaining the order as well as direct the operation of entire system. Now register. So what is this register? It is nothing but the storage unit. It is mainly used to store the data as well as used to store the instruction. And I'm going to have different kinds of register, that is general purpose register as well as specific purpose register. So registers are used to store instructions and intermediate data which may be generated during processing. So to store the instruction, I'm going to use the register. At the same time, to store intermediate result which is generated during the processing, once again I'm going to use register, and there are two type of register, general purpose register as well as specific purpose register, and most of the computers will have general purpose register as well as special purpose register. Now I'm going to have the arithmetic unit as well as logical unit, and together it is known as ALU or arithmetic as well as logical unit, that is arithmetic and logical unit. So here, as the name itself indicates, that it is responsible for performing all the arithmetic operations as well as logical operations, as well as relational operation, and all these operations are carried out by the arithmetic and logic unit, and it's also known as ALU. So all the arithmetic and logical unit performs arithmetic and logical operations. Along with that, controls the speed of the operation. Along with that, it's also responsible for controlling the speed of the operation, and it's also responsible for performing all the basic arithmetic operations like plus, minus, multiplication, division. That is nothing but addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. Along with that, it is also responsible for performing logical operations like and, or, not. Along with that, it's also responsible for performing operations like greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. So all these things are carried out by the arithmetic and logical unit. So what's the main job of the ALU? That is perform all the arithmetic operations as well as logical operations as well as relational operations. Along with that, control the speed of the operation. Followed by, I'm going to have storage unit. So what is this storage unit? So dear student, if I consider memory, memory means what? To store the data, I required space or I required repository. So here repository is nothing but memory. Now the memories are categorized into two types, that is primary memory as well as secondary memory, and all the data are stored in the primary memory, that is in the random access memory. Now if I consider storage unit, it is nothing but the secondary storage device, and all the data are stored in this secondary storage device, and this kind of memory is less expensive and it provides large storage space. For that reason, all the data are stored in the storage unit, and the example for secondary storage unit is magnetic tape, hard disk, floppy disk, etc. But in computer system, all the data are stored in the main memory, and the size of the main memory is very less. For that reason, most of the data are stored in the secondary storage. But before going to execute any program or any data, that must be brought into the main memory from the secondary memory. Now, I'm going to have output unit. So, why I required output unit? To provide the output to the user, and I can able to provide the output to the user in two ways, that is soft copy as well as hard copy. And the most commonly used output device is monitor. So an output device is mainly hardware. So output device is nothing but the example for an hardware component that conveys information to one or more people in user understandable form. So it's mainly used to convey the information to the user. So the example for output device, I can able to consider monitor as well as printer. So this is all about the functional components of a computer system. And dear student, from the examination point of view, this is very, very important topic. So if you get this question, then you have to answer all the points along with the diagram, along with functions of computer system. So dear student, in my today's session, I started with the functional building block of computer system or block diagram of a computer. So in my next session, I'm going to deal with number system. So dear student, let's meet in the next session with more information about computers. That is nothing but fundamentals of computers. Until then, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.